Good morning, good morning, good morning. My name is Jonathan Whitney, and I'll be your moderator today for the first of two workshops, just talking about spreading this knowledge about jazz. I'd like to thank the city of Wilmington, and I'm proud to be a part of its International Jazz Day events. This first workshop will be getting your act together, turning pro. We have Mike Boone in the house, Nadjah, Nicole in the house, and Gerald Chavis, three pros who have done it on many levels, toured, worked in the TV industry, been the workhorse in many bands in the area. So we'll have some conversations with them. Please put your questions in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. What do you wish you could ask someone who's been there or someone who is there? What do you wish you could ask them? How do I get the big gig? How did you get to know this person? All those things. And take a second, just to think about, what do you want to do with your career next? Because after this, our next session is taking it to the next level, preparing for artist management and agency management. We have two of the top managers and artist agents in the game, Gail Boyd from Gail Boyd Artist Management and Chris Meese from Be Natural Inc. So you get to talk to them and say, ask their questions and hear what they're saying. What do they look for artists? How do they know an artist is ready for management? So it's time for that. We have a little video we're going to start out with, though. A little video we'll start out with that we've been asking our artists for the Clifford Brown Year-Round series what they would tell somebody that's getting ready to turn pro. What is the advice they would give? So here's a short video from them, just, passing on some knowledge.
What I wish I knew at the beginning of my career, from what I know now, is the dedication it takes, the consistency that it takes to be a professional. What I mean by that is that it's not enough just to practice every day. What we have to do is we have to create a journal so that we can write down what we're practicing. And then we can hold ourselves accountable to our growth. And I didn't know that at the beginning, but I do now. And that's really helped me as a musician to hold myself accountable and to really see my growth. And if it's not happening, then to make changes for it to happen. So the next step for the players that are playing the big gigs and playing all around the world, and those aren't, sometimes it's by chance and circumstance, but other times it's due to dedication as well. The greatest thing that we can do as musicians is not only to practice and work on our craft, but it's to get out and hear other musicians. It's to also identify musicians that we consider our mentors, those that are considered jazz masters. So we want to listen to the music on a high level as far as recordings. We want to get out and we want to support our musical friends. And through support, there's a word called networking that happens. I don't like to use that word, but you can get out and you can hear people perform. You can follow these people. You can let them know, hey, one day I would love to play your music if there's an opportunity. You work on that music, and then all of a sudden great opportunities come your way. Great things happen for you. So study the jazz masters, really learn the recordings, learn the tunes, learn the solos, so that when you are ready to be called, you are prepared.
Okay. I want to say, never stop learning, never ever stop striving, and never think that you arrived, because just when you got to the level that you think you wanted to be, guess what? It's more time. You need to keep on growing, so it never stops. Remind yourself that it's the purpose of you as a musician in the world, and you don't have to be like somebody else. Just be you. Thank you.
Well, I think it's very important for each one to listen to each other, respect each other, never ever give up. Follow your dreams, believe in yourself, and study your instrument.
Remain humble and pleasant to work with, because there's a lot of musicians in the world. And it's always great to, add your personal spark to the picture, but also to, remember it's about the journey, not exactly always the gig. So it's all about the people you meet along the journey.
I wanted to say what they said, which was listen to everybody that you're playing with always, because that's lesson number one. Number two is respect everybody, but also don't get discouraged because you're going to meet people that are going to make you want to quit, and don't quit because they're playing so good. But you just got to keep working at it to get to where you want to get to.
So I think it's important just to be present, be in the moment, listen to your fellow musicians, and give your all at all times.
Thank you. So let me just bring in our panelist. The first panelist we have is Gerald Chavis. This was actually, this panel, these forums came out of a conversation with Gerald around, what knowledge we want to pass on. Part of what COVID broke up was this idea that jazz is passed on at gigs, at jam sessions. All that knowledge is passed on, and that conduit has been broken. And so, as for those young players that are getting ready to cross into the pro world, this is your opportunity. So welcome, Gerald. Oh, you're muted. Let's see. Well, we'll work that out in a second. Let's see here. And then we have Nadjah Nicole. Nadjah Nicole is in the house. This is a young lady who has been there in LA on the East Coast. She's played the big venues. She's played the small venues. She has played it all. Her voice is beautiful at the highest levels. So Nadjah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Hi, everybody, finally.
Hey, Gerald's in. And then we have the godfather of the jazz scene in Philly. I don't think there's a jazz player that came out of the Philly school that can say that they didn't play with or learn from, at least for my generation, on Mike Boone. So Mike Boone is in the house.
Wow, that's very humbling. Jeez. Thank you, Jonathan. Hey, Nadjah. Hey, Gerald. How you folks doing?
Hey.
Wow. All of a sudden, I just got kind of like a little, wow. It's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'll get into that.
Gerald, can you start off? I mean, there's a couple of things. Like when you came up with this initial idea, you were talking about there's some givens that every player has before they turn pro. There's the givens, and then we have some things that we're going to talk about, which are things you can work on. But can you talk about what the givens are?
Yeah, the givens, first and foremost is study your instrument. It's one thing to say, pick up an instrument and play around with it. It's another thing to study it. And I think that if you're really serious about the music, that's the starting point, because there are fundamentals for every instrument that every person that plays that instrument is supposed to be able to do. That's called proficiency, right? So the first step is becoming proficient on your instrument. And then I guess we're going to take it from that point on, given that a person knows their scales and knows how to finger their notes and, can play in time, that kind of stuff. I guess we'll be talking about it beyond that point.
Yeah, I think one of the things we spoke about when we had a pre-conversation was that there's a lot of people out right now that have chops that know their instrument inside and out, know the music inside and out, but aren't working. That aren't working. So let's get into that next thing. What's next? Why not? And I think one place to start was, Terrell brought up the term networking. I like the term the hang, because I think that's what networking is in jazz, the hang, in music, period. Can we talk about the hang a little bit? Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Can I jump in? No, go ahead, Nadjah, please.
Okay. So it's funny. Me and my dad, when I first started performing, one of the first things we did was go hang in the studio. And the people that we met in the studio or in church were like, you know, come to this event, come to this club, come to this bar. Mind you, I was only like 13. So he was like, you know, we have to just go and hang out and just network and be a part of what they're doing for them to kind of get to know you and figure you out. So most of what I learned was just in being immersed in that hang. And whether I was with my dad or my mom or just other musicians, I learned a lot about musician. I call it musician language. Like I learned to communicate, you know, what I wanted musically. I learned how to, you know, network as far as, okay, I need this number because this person knows how to get to this gig and this person plays the style that I like. And, you know, it was really important to be in that crowd.
Yeah, the hang and the hang is exactly what you said. It's in person. It's in the space that we live in. You know, the hang's not on in the comments.
Right.
Yeah. I remember hearing years back, in order to be on the scene, you need to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
That means, get out there, you know, and do that thing.
Not even just like something I remember was going to other artists' events, even if you weren't invited, even if you're not expected to perform, just going to show support. And, you know, I have to say, Mr. Gerald has literally had me in almost everything he can put me in. Like, even if I don't, I'm like, you want me to what? Okay, let's do it. Like, just going and being a part of it, because people remember that. They remember your willingness to learn, your willingness to be part of the movement, you know? So, you know, just be in it.
Yeah, it's not just a job, it's an adventure.
Yes.
It's a career, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Can I jump in there a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's all good. I know for me, and I think what we have to remember, and going back to what Nadjah said, like her dad took her around, we have to remember how we got into music. We were listeners first. Mm-hmm. We were however age or whatever. We weren't on the bandstand. We weren't on the stage. We were there, and we heard what we heard for that first time or whatever. We were in church, whatever it was. We listened. Music is about listening first. Yeah. Listening. You got to listen before anything. You got to listen while you're doing all that stuff. Anyway, just that feeling. You heard somebody sing. You heard somebody play the trumpet. You heard somebody play the drums. I heard the piano or the bass, whatever. That affected you to the point where you wanted to do that, you know. And now years later, you're doing that, and it's cyclical because a lot of folks are giving it back. But the point is, there were people out there that love this music just as much as you did when you first heard it. Miles referred to musicians that don't play instruments, and at these hangs, what we were talking about, especially back in the day, you know, and it could be, you know, you have those people, that audience of folks that know the music just as intimately or that genre as the music, the players, and you know, there were stories back in the day with those guys, you know, those folks would actually get mad at you if they could tell whether you were playing good or not, you know. So it was a communal thing. Everybody knew what was going on, and everybody was just striving. So yeah, I mean, it's a social thing. You know, that's the reason why they say music is a universal language, you know. So
yeah.
You know, so all right, enough of that little.
No, I want to go back to you because you've taught so many musicians through the jam session. You know, the open mic and song tradition, but the jam session and jab tradition. And that's a place where a lot of knowledge is passed on. Gerald, you've been on in that world. Nadjah, you came up in it. Can we talk a little bit about that space and, you know, how to navigate it, what you should expect when you arrive, you know, for younger players that are going to heavier jam sessions? Because, the little jam sessions. I remember the first time I went to Ortlieb's and saw those guys on stage. Orrin Evans was on the piano, you know? You're talking heavies. What's it like? How do you take your first steps into there, and how do you make sure you're getting everything you can get from those moments that you get with these great players on the stage at a high level jam session.
Who's that directed? Oh.
But I think we can start with Mike, and then we can move it around.
Yeah, all right. Since I feel like I've opened the faucet, so let me just get all this stuff out. Yeah, I mean, once again, going back to the listening, when I started going down there, the folks that really held court were Shirley Scott, who played the piano, Arthur Harper, who played the bass, and Mickey Roker, who played the drums. Between those three, they had literally played with every important jazz figure. I mean, you could just go down the line, just individually, but collectively, they were the house band for a number of years. So we just got to hear some masters perform, 2 to 4 times, 4 nights a week on average. And they would back up the horn players that would come in or the vocalists. And we would just listen to how they would just listen, once again, how they would play and listen to each other, how they would play behind the instrumentalists or whoever they were accompanying, how a lot of times Mickey and Shirley would lay out while Arthur would play an unaccompanied bass solo that sounded like it was out of time, but it was really in time because they would come in and bang, so you had to be on point. So we just had to listen, and eventually, people would call you up, and you would just, hopefully you would have your stuff together. And I don't know. I mean, it varies. Like I say, with them, I've hardly ever sat in because it was just, there was no point. That they were holding court. When I was doing the jam session, it was on Tuesdays with Pete Souders, and that was with Sid Simmons and Byron Landham. And I kind of feel like we were like their grad assistants. If that was if I looked at Ortley's as a kind of school, those were the main, Shirley, Mickey, Harper, and then you also had Sam Dockery. You also had Bobby Dorm, and you had just a handful of other people. Bootsy Barnes, some other folks, but that was like the top tier. And those guys had done everything. You had a guy named Jimmy Oliver who had showed John Coltrane some stuff. I mean, going way back. It was just anyway. That was the top line. I felt like myself and Sid and Byron, we were kind of like grad assistants, although Sid was kind of leaning towards that. I don't know. Now I think back, and what we did, we just played tunes, and we just tried to kind of emulate what they did, but through our filter. We were a little younger, so I think our sound was a little more modern. And in terms of folks coming up to get to the point, they'd have to, hopefully we play behind them and guide them in terms of whether they were playing. Sometimes people would play too long. That's always a big thing, and just having to, politely or not so politely tell them not to do that. And a lot of stuff a lot of the education happens off the bandstand, like with the conversation, hopefully. Sometimes with me, they say I would kind of yell at people, and that's some old school kind of stuff, But that's Gerald could probably attest, and it's just I stopped doing that. But the point is, you have the conversation, you talk about what happened, because the music's important. Like I said, people are listening to the music. I'm going to always go back to that, and listening takes place on the bandstand, takes place off the bandstand. Some of my best music lessons have been at the bar, listening to Mickey or whoever, or outside, hanging out, just talking about somebody, just listening to one Harper or somebody just talking about stuff. And that kind of gets in your spirit, because it's about a language. If you're trying to convey this music to everybody, not just your peers, so it's not about you. Technically, you got to get the notes, you got to get all that stuff. But I think you can also get that feeling while you're doing that. And I think if you constantly are working back to what Gerald was saying about in the beginning about working on the instrument, all that's common, all that's constant. You're constantly working on that instrument, but you're also constantly listening and trying to listen and just make some music. Okay.
If I can piggyback a little bit, I mean, Mike, you said it all, brother. But what I'd like to add is it's a journey that hasn't ended for me yet. I don't think it will ever end until I take my last breath. A jam session is a sharing. You got to be really honest with yourself, because the people around you are going to be honest with you. And
Yes.
Sometimes your biggest disappointments are the best thing that could have happened in your life. You know what I mean? I made a total fool out of myself. Not last night. No, a couple of years, no. When I first started, I was early, and that lesson right there just kind of focused everything. Practice, the proficiency, finding my voice, listening to the music, and then listening to the musicians, what they have to say, where they've been, what they know. And that happens now, and it's ageless. It doesn't matter. It could be an older musician or a younger musician. Everybody brings something to the table, but you got to be true to yourself and open enough to receive things. Nobody knows it all.
I can agree on that. I've made a fool of myself at jam sessions. I can wholeheartedly and transparent. I can be transparent. I am not a jam session artist. Okay. Those things terrify me. Have I done them? Yes, I've done well. But I've also done terrible. But the biggest thing is listening and being real with yourself, because I've actually been to them and not participated. And the one thing that I can't stand is secondhand embarrassment. And that's when someone gets on the stage in the middle of a jam session, and if you've been there, you can hear there is no set song. The vibe is going, the music is flowing, and you have to jump up there and be ready to just go with it, But there have been people who get up there and have not listened, and they try to do their own song, like an actual cover, instead of moving with the flow of the band. It's almost like being at the beach and you go in to, do not what the wave is trying to do. The wave's coming this way and you go this way. It doesn't make sense. Stop it. the wave will win. So you have to listen. You have to be mindful of your surroundings, and you have to be real with yourself. I'm real with myself. Honey, you can't get up there. But I've had to go through some things to learn that about myself. I had to embarrass myself a little bit. And I also had to listen to my peers who were like, you know what, sis, I can see you're talented, but this is what you need to work on. You need to work on your confidence. You need to work on your note choice. You need to listen to this part or that part. And it's really those three things: listening, talking to yourself, and being confident.
And I think you touched on an important thing when it comes to knowing the jam session you're walking into.
Yeah.
I remember going into Ortlieb's, you didn't walk up there with your real book, because the tune's already over by the time you found the page. Knowing that this is a space where you have to know the tunes. There's a reason why there's a vocabulary we all know. In that so we can get past the notes in the like we said, we all know how to play the instrument. Jazz isn't about the notes and the rhythms. That's a given. Jazz is about the communication that happens between players. And jam sessions are the essence of that. When you talk about players that don't know each other, that are coming together with a shared vocabulary, finding and learning about each other in the moment, and creating art. First, let's go to one quick question from the comments, and then we'll move through some other topics. We had this great question from one of our pillars, Ray Jones Avery. How do jazz university programs advance or perhaps have some limitations? And what about those that can't afford formal study? So let's just talk briefly. I don't want to climb too much in, because really I think that this comes from, we're talking after college, but we can talk a little bit about, preparation that happens in college, but also what about those that can't go there and want to be, at the next level? How do we help them?
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about formal study, there are two schools of thought. One is formal lessons. The other is being on the scene and being in somebody's hip pocket. I used to ask guys if I could carry their gear just so I could hang out and I could soak up some knowledge. Just like I say, being on the scene and being open and receptive for formal study. Jazz university programs, I don't know, Mike, you want to talk about that? I mean,
we don't have, well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm actually an adjunct professor. I've been there, just finished my 16th year. So I think what the universities do, they definitely provide the notes and all that stuff, and some repertoire, some common music in terms of like tunes that people should know. Because if you go anywhere in the world, there's like maybe 50, 60 tunes that you should know. Everybody should know Autumn Leaves. Everybody should know, blues forms. Everybody, there's certain things. And then after that, it gets, because there's thousands and thousands of tunes, but there's certain tunes that universally, because once again, that universal language. As far as what Gerald's, the other thing, if you could find some older people, like you said, just the folks that, if they're around, if they didn't come through some kind of organized academic, environment or limited, if they had more real life experience, if they actually had a chance to play with some of the folks that even came before them, it's a lineage. You want to try to reach back as far as you can to get some roots while you're reaching ahead, looking into the future. I think I look at it as a conveyor belt. We get on this belt and people have been on this belt before us. And as we pass on, people get on, and the key is to reach back and reach ahead. And that's how I see, that's what needs to happen after the academic experience, or hopefully during. I mean, like I say, once again, it's about the listening thing. So I tried to condense that.
Yeah. And I think that there's also space right now. I mean, there's outside of college programs, there's a lot of residencies for students. We had in Wilmington, we had the Boise Lowry Living Jazz Residency, where cats can come in and for 2 weeks study with Mike, and Gerald's been on the faculty, and spend time with Ari Honig and Aaron Deal, and have these learn the language in an intense setting, and then take it and run with it. You have the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program that Jason Moran's running down at the Kennedy Center. There's a lot of programs around the country for players who can't get into, who don't have the funds, because college is expensive, especially if you're getting a jazz degree. A lot of these programs are fully subsidized if you're serious about your instrument and ready to get it in. So I think that's another space. Let's move into some experiences. One of the things we wanted to talk about was like, how do I get from the small gigs to the big gigs? And what's it like on these bigger gigs? So we have a lot of examples. All three of you have these great examples of spaces you've been in. I wanted to start with Nadjah. Could you just give us a little bit what it was like to be like on a TV set? And what was it like going through that grinder of learning tunes when you're on The Voice and that that world? Like how was that different than the smaller gigs?
How is it different from the smaller gigs, and what was it like? What it was like was exhausting. Some of the hardest work I've done next to childbearing. I was up at hours I did not want to be up at, and I was singing songs I didn't necessarily want to sing, but I will say that they instilled a work ethic in me that I'll never forget. What people see is beautiful, but it's ugly behind scenes. It's very ugly. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of learning, a lot of listening. And the one thing that I admired about being on the show was they were very matter of fact. There wasn't like I see this, my generation, we have a lot of, my husband calls them bluebities, but we have these bluebity musicians who are like, yeah, I'm good. I got it. And, you know, we have to do rehearsal. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you've got the wrong one. We rehearse here. We know the songs when we go on stage. When I was on the show, if you showed up to a rehearsal and you didn't know your music, no matter if they sent it to you the night before, they sent you home. So it was a testament to, this is not a game. You said you want to be here. We're sacrificing money for you to be here. You need to be prepared. So I learned so much about being a professional being on the show. It made my smaller gigs, it made me have more pride and more confidence in myself to say, you know what, I deserve more because of what I've been through and what I've learned and who I've worked with. And not to say that it's all about money, but what I tell artists now, like a lot of people will call me for advice, and I tell people, remember your worth. Remember your worth. Just because someone has a gig open doesn't mean you have to take it. You know, what are you capable of doing? How good do you sound? What kind of work do you put into it? Then you make the decision based off of that. So I think TV just gave me that work ethic and that confidence to know who I am and what I'm worth and what I can provide people.
Yeah, I think you gave us a lens into, you know, what's it like behind the scenes. So many times, like you said, people think that the beauty there, they must be having fun in rehearsal back there.
No.
Or when the cameras go on, you know. I mean, Gerald and I can share stories from gigs we just did, you know, where like right before the cameras turn on, there's chaos. You never know what's happening in production.
No.
But professionals, when the camera turns on, when the curtain opens, it doesn't matter. Now it's showtime. It's time to hit, you know, and that's it right there.
No excuses.
Yeah.
Hit it, smack it.
Any other like insights in that world, you know, Mike or Gerald? You know, you guys have both been on some stages, you know, and played a lot of different venues. You know, how did you get there? You know, I don't know, Mike. Yeah, there's so many places. You know, whether it's the what is it, the Verdine gig, or you know, anywhere. Gerald, you've been all over. How did you get them? What was the thing that got you into that next level of gigs?
Well, a little bit of background on me. I started studying. I got, well, after really embarrassing myself at some Gerald jam sessions in my 20s, and I started studying. I worked with Boise Lowry. One of the things Boise used to always tell all of his students, you know, he said, you want to work, you want to get yourself to a position that when somebody needs a trumpet player, they think of you first. Now, what does that mean? That means, first of all, you don't want to burn no bridges. You know, it's like all that encompasses everything. You got to be the consummate musician, or the very best that you can be at all times. But you also got to be a decent person that people want to be around. I know some great musicians that I would never hire.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's we talked about that a little early, and that's important. It's like a checklist that needs to, once again, it's stuff that happens on the bandstand, but just as much, or maybe a little more, it's stuff that happens off the bandstand. You know, you can swing on the bandstand and not swing off the bandstand. You know, and once again, it's like being a decent person, being punctual, being caring, all that stuff. and also, because and being in the right place. I mean, just knowing folks. I mean, for me, I knew a piano player that was in school that I met, and that's how that worked out. I got the gig with Ben Vereen through a pianist named Dave Loeb, who was in the master's program, and I was at Eastman. So a lot of those people you meet in school, it's just some networking that way. But it's just being a decent person, I think that, and that applies to any kind of field. People want to. Gerald said they think of you first. You're pleasant to be around. You're gonna uplift their spirits. They know that you're gonna pull the best out of them. They know you're gonna be punctual. They know you're gonna hopefully learn the music. If they're flexible, you gotta be flexible sometimes. Hopefully you're patient. If something goes, a little awry, you're not like getting into some kind of hissy fit. Do they say that word anymore? So just different things. Just being, just being chill. I don't know. That's very important. And being prepared. And there you go.
I think to sum it up, like, your actions affect whether or not you get hired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not always about the music. And a lot of times it is, like Nadjah mentioned, I had to really, 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 really work on my reading as an adult. I started getting calls, to make shows like, I don't know if they do this anymore, but like, say, the Spinners and the Dells and the Temptations and the Fools, when they would come to town, they would hire horn sections from that city. They wouldn't travel like in the old days. They might travel around with a full band, but they would usually come with a rhythm section, and they would hire the horns, and they would just have music. You'd have a rehearsal in the afternoon. You run the show down, and then it's showtime. And if you can't sight read, bye. We'll see you later. We got somebody else to take your place. It's that cold, and it only. Thank God that never happened to me, but you never want that to happen to you. So you gotta do the music thing. You got to be on point on both the personal, interpersonal, and the musical thing. Is to get to the next level, to be attractive to someone who might be in a position to further your career.
Yeah, the music's a gift.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Nadjah.
If I could just add to that, I plan on working with Mr. Mike Boone soon because he's the only one in this panel I haven't worked with. But I've learned, like, I don't read music. Shame on me, I know. But I have left a good enough impression with people to have them say, you know what, I'm going to work with you. Because I said to Jonathan, because we have a gig coming up, and I said, I don't read music. And he says, I'm going to work it out for you, And we've only played with each other one other time. But because of that one other time and the relationship that we built from that point, he's willing to work with me. Just like Mr. Gerald knows I don't read music. But I'm willing to sit there and I'm going to listen to everything you got to tell me so I can be right there with you. It's being a good person, being able to listen and also being that person that says, you know what, I understand your limitations, but I'm going to work with you because I know that you can follow through. So,
and I think the thing for me is that you were very clear about where your limitation is, but also what you need. And I think that's what sometimes when people have limitations, they put it on everybody else. I've worked with band leaders who can't tell us what's wrong, but they're like, that ain't it. And, but nobody improves from that, but, say like, this is what I need. This is how boom, we know, and that's really being clear with yourself, right? Being clear with yourself and with everybody else. We're actually almost to the end. We have about 15 minutes left. But a couple things I want to make sure we touched on. One, we've already sort of touched on this thing with like always bringing your whole self to the gig, making sure that you're not phoning it in because you don't know who's out there, And I think that sort of falls into what we were just talking about when it comes to you're constantly maintaining relationships. And sometimes those relationships, you don't even know they're in the room.
Yeah.
You know, it might be somebody that saw you that's off that night, you know, and they're just coming into this small bar and you're thinking it's a small bar gig, but somebody that wanted to hire you for a big gig and just was checking in.
You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And every
Okay.
time you play is the first impression,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So you got to bring your A game.
All the time. But there's something that Nadjah, you brought up in our conversations ahead of time. You brought up the paperwork,
Yeah.
you know, and the importance of defining these relationships. Can you talk a little bit about that, like starting that world for us?
Yeah. So I've had experience on with not having paperwork and not being able to put out a project. I've had experience signing things and not understanding what I signed. And also sending or having people send me things and they not realize what they sent me. And I'm like, wait a minute now, section B1 says we need to fix that. My generation, because that's, you know, I have to speak to my generation. We have this, hey, that's my homeboy, that's my homegirl, we family, just get in the studio, cut a lyric, cut a song, and we're good, you know. No, we're not good, because the legality of the situation will get you in some serious trouble. So we have to remember that even though we have friends in music, it's still business. And to protect, to CYA, we all know what that means. To CYA, you need to read paperwork, prepare paperwork, save paperwork, and have it at all times. And if you can't read it, find someone who can help you, because it's important and it's your likeness. You know, you're not going to sign over, you know, your grandma was very, very specific about who she allowed to have the recipes of her sweet potato pie. You need to be the same way about your voice, about your instrument, about your production, because it's your, and you don't want anyone else profiting off of your talent. And you don't want to sign something or give yourself away and you have no way out. You didn't take the time and do your due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just before anybody else jumps in on that, I just want to say that our next workshop, you know, is focused on this world. You know, starting to get into management, starting to get into being hiring a booking agent, but also Gail Boyd, one of the panelists, is an entertainment lawyer. So if you have questions around this world, stick around, ask. You know, the thing I learned, you know, I've had the opportunity to be on both the presenter side and the artist side, is the contracts are the beginning of the negotiation. That's where you get to move things around. When you get handed that sheet of paper, you don't have to sign everything on that sheet of paper. That sheet of paper is written with the other person's wants and needs. You add your needs into it. You know, so making that assumption and realizing that this isn't. I remember the first time I was handed one, I thought I had to sign it. You know, that it was, I was supposed to, they're telling me what I was supposed to be doing, but it's not true. You can add what you want in there. It's a negotiation. You may not get everything you want, but have an idea of what that is.
Yeah.
You know, not be afraid to use it. And with define relationships. That's how you save friendships. Defining business allows you to save friendships. Go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. It's important, you know, we think of ourselves as artists, but it's important to think of ourselves also as business owners and entrepreneurs. When you are, you know, interacting with a presenter or something, it's your future. You know what I'm saying? If you have a store and you make it so that nobody wants to come to your store, you're not going to be in business very long. So if you approach it as being self-employed, which we are, you know, as far as the government's concerned, most of it. So, you know, approach it from being self-employed and responsible for everything that happens to you, because you have a voice, you have a brain, and you got to use it all. You know, contracts are not one-sided, or should not be one-sided, that kind of thing. So approach it as a business.
Yeah. Well, we're coming towards the end, so I think it would be great to have some closing comments that you just want to make that we didn't touch on anything. Um, One thing I wanted to make sure just to touch on just real quick was interaction with presenters for those artists that are starting to get into band leading. And there's a couple things that a lot of people miss when it comes to beginning to book your own gigs. One is make sure you return communications.
Yes.
So if you reach out to somebody or somebody reaches out to you to book a gig, call them back immediately. Even if it's just, even if you can't do it right away, if it's like, hey, I'm on vacation, you see that, text it back. Hey, my self signal's low, I'm on vacation, but I see you.
Yeah.
That acknowledgement is huge. Communication. 2, have your promo material ready to go in an easy place. How's somebody supposed to save supposed to market your gig if you don't give them a video or your photos? You're pulling them off of Facebook, or how is a presenter going to present you? So you have to have all those things, and it's not that right nowadays. All it is a Google account. Put it on Google Drive. Have your folder that has a couple articles, a couple high-res photos, and links to a couple YouTube videos. And then all you have to do is share that link. Now you've made it possible for that next level presenter to put you in their flyer, put you in the paper, put you on their Facebook page, share your videos. But if they have to run around and you're sending them these thumbnails off of, I don't know where my videos are, so I just grab it off of Facebook and send it over. That photo can't be used on anything. It's too small. Facebook degrades the photos. Okay, so you have to think about that kind of stuff. Keep track of your things. And then when you're on the gig, just walk in and say hi to the presenter.
Yes.
Say hi to the person. Shake their hand and say hi. That's that relationship thing. This is a business. If you think about what would 2 CEOs do if they're getting ready to buy each other's companies, they're going to walk into that table and say, hey, how's it going? Shake hands and move. This is a business transaction. Just go look the person in the eye and shake their hand and say, hey, thanks for bringing me in. We look forward to working with you, and realize that this is a two-way street. They're making money off of you just like you're making money off of them. If they don't make money, you don't make money. If you don't make money, they don't make money. It goes both ways. So just realize it's a relationship. It's treated like that, But that was my little thing. Mike, why don't you go ahead? Anything you want to add to the world?
I think I've said enough. I just, once again, it's about just being professional, just being, just having your checklist and being true. What I will say, and it's just one of my own things I tell my students, you need to get to the point, and I guess this is just in terms of your development. If you could be your harshest critic and your biggest fan, if you can balance the two, it's easy for us as artists to be our harshest critic because we hear ourselves. Some of us, oh God, I hate, and we're going to do that. But you got to pick yourself up after that and say, because who else is going to really pump you up once all this business stuff? You gotta be like, because when you're on point, Nadjah, you're just as good as anybody. When you're on point, Gerald, you're just as good as anybody. When all 8 cylinders are firing. That's what it is, and that's what you're striving for, and that's what's going to get out. Sorry about this. Going to get out to the people. So be your biggest, harshest critic, and your biggest fan, or your biggest fan and your heart, however you want to do it. But that's what you need to do.
I want to share there's a book if anybody's struggling with that, because that's something a lot of young musicians struggle with, right? Is this mind game? Kenny Werner's Effortless Mastery. Man, it's a great read. So just take a second, and if you're struggling with that, read that book, go through the exercises. It can really help with this mindset thing. Gerald,
after everything that we've covered, just want to remind aspiring artists that don't forget to promote yourself as best you can. I know a lot of people do the Facebook thing and everything, but I know a lot of musicians particularly, that they want the gig to come to them. Like they're going to sit at home and magically your phone is going to ring, and it's going to be Stevie Wonder or somebody. Promote yourself. Believe in yourself. Have faith that the gift that God gave you is sufficient.
That's bad.
I know, Pastor. Okay.
I need some music now. The organ need to come in. Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, that's some real rap, man.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to boost that video that came out. Don't be afraid to put it out there. It is, you know what? Ray Jones Avery is a mentor for many of us, and she talks about it's your brand.
Yeah.
And your brand is partially your personality, partially all these things we've been talking about is your brand. How you play, how you interact with people, whether or not you're on time, whether or not you shake that hand, and part of your brand is getting the word out about you.
Yep.
It's crowded, especially right now. Nadjah, what do you got for us?
Just simply put, I tell people all the time, success and fame are two different things. They can go together, but they can also be one or the other. And know the difference. You could be famous and not be successful, like these, TikTok viral people, or the one-hit wonders. And then you can be successful and not be famous. Pick which one you want to be. And if you're going to be both, you got to work. But just know the difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for just sharing all your background, all your knowledge. I'm hoping the comments have been active, so I'm hoping that there's been some lives changed. For everybody out there, this video will be up for in perpetuity. We won't be taking it down, so share it out. Use it in your classes. There's a lot of knowledge that was shared here. Thank you so much. We are going to transition now to our next panel. I'm going to say goodbye to Gerald and Mike and Nadjah, and just share.
Thanks for everything, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Love you guys.
Jonathan.
Be family.
See you soon. All
Send me
right.
my paperwork.
On it, writing it. Yeah, we're moving into the next area. We have artist management, preparing for performing artist management and agency representation. And our moderators for this workshop will be Ray Jones Avery and Tina Betts. And they'll introduce their panelists. This is an opportunity for those of us, and I found that I didn't have a lot of mentors who were represented at one point. And I wish I had just known what's happening over there. How do you know when you get representation? What's the difference between a manager and an agent? This is a chance to talk to two of the top in their game of what's going on. Before we go to that, I just want to say the other thing that for all the artists out there to think about is grant opportunities. If you're in Delaware, the Delaware Division of the Arts has grants for jazz players. The opportunity grant is $750 that you can use to finish up a performance. If you need some extra money for production, some extra money to buy some equipment, you want to take lessons with that person whose fee is $100, but it could be life-changing. There's a grant for that, and it's simple. So Delaware Division of the Arts. Jazz Roads, if you're on that edge now and you're ready to start the tour and you're wondering, how do I put together a tour because these venues can't pay me what I need to bring my musicians along, Jazz Roads subsidizes tours. So $5,000 to $15,000 to tour to 3 or more venues, 3 to 6 sites. This is money that could take a tour from being like in your car, sleeping in your car, making $100 and maybe breaking even or coming out underneath, to you go tour and now you actually come out with some money in your pocket so you can make a living, and you can leverage those relationships you've made on this tour to expand next time. So really think about this Jazz Roads program. They also just released the Jazz Roads Residency program, which is up to $50,000, where you can go somewhere and stay for a week and dive into communities, write music based on those communities. There's 1,000 different ways that jazz music can engage with communities, and we need to keep dreaming about that. And Jazz Road is helping to pay for those dreams so they can happen. So check it out. South Arts is the foundation. Jazz Road is the grant. Go there, look it up. If you need help, I'll put my email in the chat, Jonathan@fluxcreativeconsulting.com. We will help you write the grant. Let's do it. Let's get it out there, Wilmington. Let's get it out there, Philly. Let's get it out there. All right, so I'm going to pass it off now to Tina Betts and Ray Jones Avery, and I'm going to get out of the way.
Thanks, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. That was some really good information. A great conversation about what do I do now, type of thing. So thank you very, very much, and thanks to the panelists for sharing their wealth of information. I'm Tina Betts, and I'm joined by Ray Jones Avery. Hi, Ray. So once you decide to go pro, how do you take it to the next level? I mean, there are some questions that you need to ask yourself. I mean, should I continue to, promote myself, manage myself, find bookings myself, or do I go to a booking agent and manager? And, most importantly, for a lot of people, what's the difference between a booking agent and a manager? There are two totally different roles that they play. If I decide that I'm ready for a booking agent or manager, how much is it going to cost me? I mean, how can I continue to take a living, but surround myself with people who can help me make a living? How do I find a person who I can work with, who wants to work with me, where the relationships will be mutually beneficial and congenial? I mean, we talked a little bit earlier how relationships with a booking agent or a manager is sort of like a marriage. We really need to get along, need to get on the same page. So those are some of the types of things that we will cover when we speak with our two panelists today, Gail Boyd and Chris Meese. And just a little bit about both Gail and Chris. Gail Boyd has Gail Boyd Artist Management. I've worked with Gail personally, and I know Ray has too, as presenters. Gail, in addition to having her management company, has an entertainment law firm, and she's been involved in the entertainment industry since 1976. So she has some really strong chops. She's been specifically involved with music since 1979 and with a specialty in jazz. She's worked with some greats. She served as a production coordinator for a concert that Quincy Jones did in New York. As a lawyer, Gail has represented artists such as Betty Carter, Tommy Flanagan, and Kenny Barron. And many of the artists on Gail's roster are Grammy nominated and Grammy Award winners. Chris Meese, our second panelist, came into the jazz world as a bassist, and then he decided that he wanted to do something different. He still plays. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit when we have him on screen. In 2014, Chris decided to move from being active as a professional musician to helping other musicians on their journey. So he founded Be Natural Management and worked as J. Chris and Company. And then he rebranded his company to Be Natural Inc. And that's what he does today. So we're going to move into this second part of this morning by having Gail and then Chris do a virtual presentation. And Jonathan, are we ready with Gail's presentation all queued up? If so, let's hit it.
Put your questions in the chat. Put your questions in the chat, and Gail will address the questions after she sets the stage. Welcome, 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 Gail.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this. It's been a wonderful morning already. I got so much out of listening to the musicians talk about what they needed to do to be heard, to be seen, to grow. So that was a perfect segue into this. So, who's going to run the PowerPoint for me? Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to sharing just a little bit of what I do. And I always start with who my mentor in jazz is. In jazz management, I will say. I was Betty Carter's attorney. And it was a point where, she would give me contracts to review. I would review them, give them back to her. They would be performance contracts or whatever. And one day I said to her, Betty, I'm having fun. I really enjoy doing the contracts for you. But then you take the contracts and go off and have all the fun. I want to go on the road. I want to see what it is you do. I want to see the end result of these contracts. And she said, oh, Gail, what you're talking about is artist management. That's not entertainment law. And a bell went off. I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. I'm going to be an artist management as well as an entertainment lawyer. And so from that, I now have a roster. If you could give me the next slide. This is my current roster. I'm very proud of all of these musicians. I will say that John Clayton and Don Braden have been with me the longest. I have managed them for 27 years. The others are newer, but Lakeisha Benjamin is red hot and growing. Brianna Thomas is an amazing vocalist. Michael Olatuja is a bassist, as is Richie Goods. They're amazing on their instruments. Naduzo Makatini is my newest client, who is a pianist from South Africa. And Scott Tixier is a violinist who he teaches at University of North Texas, but he's on probably every movie that you can imagine right now. And then I have one dance artist, Jade Solomon Curtis. So that's my roster that kind of grew out of that one conversation that I had with Betty, where she said, well, what you want to do is management. And she was so right. So what do managers do? Well, first of all, we negotiate contracts. And there are many different kinds of contracts that we do. One is we negotiate contracts with recording companies. We negotiate contracts if there is someone who wants to sign my artist to a production deal, meaning that they will then sign the artist to a record company. I have to negotiate with booking agents in terms of how long will they book my client, what the commission will be, things like that. Endorsement deals. Almost every pianist that I've ever had, I've gotten a Yamaha endorsement, which has been very helpful to them. Sync licenses if you have an original music and somebody wants to put it in a movie, and then collaborations. So those are the kinds of deals that you negotiate as a manager. And you don't have to be a lawyer to negotiate these. There are managers I know who don't have a law degree who are very good negotiators, and those are the kinds of deals. The next thing that managers do is we pay a lot of attention to artist development. And what does that mean? We heard that Ray likes to talk about branding. Well, we have to talk about your image and we have to talk about branding. And I don't know everything, but I certainly can look at an artist and say, the image that you are portraying is not the image that you are saying you want to do. So can we talk about what that means? And then, give a little tweak here and there. We might hire someone to come in and give some fashion advice or just some branding advice. I've done that with a couple of clients. Media training. That's really important because you're going to be getting interviews and you don't want to hem and haw when asked a question. But also, more importantly than that, you want to get your message out. So media training has to do with, no matter what the question is, figure out a way to get your statement out, what it is you want to say. Touring advice. So many of my clients could not afford a road manager when they're first starting out. And I will serve as the road manager. I will go out on the road and I will do what a road manager does. And then advice on musical decisions, but only when asked. I never try to tell one of my clients what they should be doing. In fact, I think it's insulting for me to do that. And then if they say to me, I'm looking for a new pianist, who do you think I should ask? If they ask me that, I will tell them the musicians that I've heard recently. So those are the kinds of things that managers do. Then there's also the business of management, and that is I will either recommend a business manager when the time comes, because as money starts to come in and if it becomes steady and as it grows, you may want a business manager to deal with paying the sidemen, paying you, putting money away for you, for your future. And so I'll make that kind of recommendation because I am not a business manager. And then it might be just an accountant, because you want to make sure that your paperwork, and I heard some of the musicians earlier talking about paperwork, you want to make sure that at the end of the year, you are able to file and pay your taxes in a way that does not get you in trouble later on. We know a lot of musicians where that has not been the case. So the next slide. How much do we earn? So the typical fee is anywhere between 15 and 20% commission on what you earn. And that's usually the net. So just as a quick example, if you do a gig for $1,000, my commission would be $150 right off the top. If the booking agent is also getting 15%, that's right off the top as well. So when you have $1,000 gig, you have to think about paying out $300 before you do anything. And so that kind of gives you a clue as to when it's time to get management, because it could very well be that you're not bringing in enough money to sustain yourself as well as two other professionals. Another way that people are paying managers now is to pay a monthly retainer against commissions. So in that example, let's say that someone has given you an opportunity to manage, to work with you in management. They may say to you, well, give me $500 a month. And if we earn commissions, I will deduct that $500 from what you owe me. And that way the manager is earning something as well as the artist. So that's how managers get their money. Now, when do you need a manager? And I'm sorry, this is a little bit small. I should have made that print lighter. But the first thing is, are you able to take care of everything that's happening for you right now? I mean, if you're getting really great offers, and if you are, and oh, thank you for making it bigger. If you're in a position where you are getting really great offers and you're not sure where to go, or as Nadjah was talking about earlier, where paperwork is being presented to you and you really don't understand it, then you might need to consult, at the very least, an entertainment attorney. If you've received an offer already for a record deal or a publishing deal, it's time to start getting professional representation. And I think probably the first person that I would say, and maybe I'm biased, but if you start thinking about whether or not you need a manager, I think you ought to look up an entertainment attorney first, because you can pay one retainer, just one consultation fee, and find out where you need to go and how you need to proceed. And so I think just having that relationship, so that if things do get better and you're ready for that, you already know somebody that you can send the contract to. And then, as I mentioned earlier, are you earning sufficient income to interest a manager to work with you? If you are making $500 tops right now, and I'm going to get 15% of that, which is $75, I may not be interested at this point, unless you have one of these other things that I talked about. You might be making $500, but somebody has discovered you and is ready to give you a record deal. So that's when you should talk to an entertainment lawyer and say, is now the time. Next. Okay, so what is my role? I like this particular artist wheel, because it really tells you in a very picturesque way how we work. The darker yellow is the manager. That means I'm encompassed in every single thing that my client does in some way or another. And there are four sort of discrete sections. That's recording, that's marketing, publicity, and a booking agent. And Chris is going to talk to you a lot more about that. But I'm going to be talking to you about whether we're going to do a traditional record deal. Am I going to go and try to get you a record deal with a record company, which I actually don't recommend anymore, but that's my own personal prejudice? Are we talking about a licensing deal? Are we talking about you doing something like GoFundMe, where you ask people to give you money and then you want to go and put it out yourself? Or do you have enough money to fund it yourself? And there are some people who have saved money and they're able to do that. But those are the kinds of discussions that we have if I'm your manager. And then once we've kind of decided how we want to proceed in that vein, now I want to talk about your social media presence. I am not a social media guru. Most of my clients, especially those who are much younger than me, are really on it. But we want to talk about, make sure that you're doing those things. I am able to talk to you about radio promotion. And whether or not that's even meaningful anymore in this age of social media, I personally think it still is. And then the internet, what are you doing? Are you making sure that you are being seen on the various YouTube channels and things like that that so many sites are doing now? And then publicity, which sort of is like marketing, but it's more targeted. You want to talk about whether you're going to hire a publicist, which if the funds are there, I highly recommend. Or if you're not, then we need to have a publicity plan. And how are we going to do that? And then last, I will let Chris Meese go into more detail about a booking agent, but I will say this, there are 3 ways to do it. You can book yourself, you can have a domestic booking agent, you can have an international booking agent, or you can have an agent that does both. And so that's sort of the role of a manager. And if you see the artist is right there in the middle, so all points lead to that artist. My job is all encompassing, but I can't do anything without that artist in the middle. And when we have that kind of relationship, the hope is that the artist won't do any of that without me. Now, how do I choose a client? So I like the idea of an acronym that I came up with a long time ago called PRICE. And the P for price is the artist performing anywhere? If you were down in your basement and you're just playing and nobody's ever heard you, nobody's ever paid a dime to come and see you perform, but you really think that you're the next greatest whatever, I'm probably not going to take you on because you don't need management at that point. You can do it at home. Has the artist recorded? And I don't mean that you have to have had a record deal, but do you know the process of recording, which would mean you need a manager? Do you know the process? You could have recorded in your home studio. That's okay. I want to be able to hear it. And I want to see if it has enough artistic legs for me to say, I would like to sell this. Is the artist innovating? That's really important for me. One of my favorite all-time musicians is John Coltrane. I still speak of him as though he's here. And I don't want you to say that all you're going to do is play John Coltrane songs, because I've got all his albums and I can hear them anytime I want. But if you're telling me that you are innovating by either a different instrumentation, or you're doing some different arrangements, or you're bringing in a big band or anything, as long as you are innovating, then that's really important, because I can't sell something that's already been done. And it's really important for me that the artist also compose music. Every single artist on my roster composes music. And that's important to me, as is the E for education, in that my motto is that I want to preserve jazz as an art form. And if my artist is not interested in composing and adding to the lexicon of jazz music, I'm probably less interested in working. And all of the artists on my roster are also very involved in education. And that doesn't have to mean that they're in a music school, but they need to be able to do residencies and workshops and things like that. So that's how I choose a client. Every artist has a manager before she has professional management, and that's you. You have to treat yourself, and I heard Gerald say that earlier, you have to treat yourself as though you are a business. You are the president and CEO of you. And you have to treat it that way. And I do know some artists who've gone so far as to create a whole nother personality. And they will call people using a different name entirely. That might be a bit much for most people, but I do know some artists who have done that. And there are some artists who could have professional management, but they choose to manage themselves. And then they hire consultants and experts to supplement their needs, and that's perfectly acceptable. So that's self-management. You have to think about not that you don't have management, but that you're managing yourself, and are you doing what it takes? So that's it in a nutshell. I am looking forward to having conversation with you and answering any questions that you might have, but that's my presentation for you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. That was more than a nutshell. That was a whole nut. Really appreciate it. That was really valuable information. And Ray is monitoring the chat room, so we encourage you to put your questions in the chat room. We also encourage you that if you know some folks who would benefit from this, and even people who aren't necessarily in the business, there's still a lot of good information here. Just what happens behind the scenes in the music industry. So put this information about this opportunity on Facebook, or send somebody a text. It's not too late to sign on to catch the balance of this workshop. And also if you had the misfortune to miss all of Gail's presentation, it will be available after the workshop is over, but won't be available. What won't be available is an opportunity to ask questions, in the moment. So call people, get them on board, so that we can, continue this really robust and informative conversation. So next up is Chris Meese, and I did mention a little bit about Chris. I just want to say again that Chris started his own company. He'd been in the business for a number of years after being a musician, but started his own company, Be Natural Management, in 2017. And Chris is here with us now. But Chris, you're muted.
There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
I've been enjoying this.
Fantastic. And I know that you have a presentation. You ready to rock it?
Sure, let's do it.
Fantastic.
Okay, yes. So I'm Chris Meese. I run a boutique management company that I call Be Natural. We are in New York City, and we've been doing this since 2015. You can go to the next slide. I'll just get right into it. First off, I'd like to thank Gail for her presentation and outlining sort of the management role. I'm going to tell you what agents do. Basically, agents are responsible for booking live performances and appearances on behalf of artists. Most agents have a roster of artists that they represent. Basically, the work comprises of pitching artists to talent buyers in various markets. So as an agent, I spend the time working with managers to pitch their various artists to talent buyers, mostly in the US, and then I work with sub-agents in Europe and other territories. As an agent, we negotiate the terms of the deal. After the deal is negotiated, we enter into contractual agreements on behalf of the artists. The commission generally is 10 to 15%. This can vary. It's usually some agents will have a hard and set commission that they take, and other agents can be a little more flexible depending on where the artist is, the fees that they're able to generate. benefits of having an agent. Usually I'm able as an agent to get the fee and the terms of the deal to the best place they can be for the artist. Meaning I can come into the deal and perhaps get the fee up, which would be excellent, or I can help negotiate other terms, hotels, travel, various buyouts, basically anything that will give the artist the best deal for the performance. I also, as an agent, spend time helping to market the artist. So basically, I take the assets that an artist or a manager gives me as an agent, and I go out and I essentially sell that product to buyers. Another benefit is that an agent can help protect the artist legally. As an agent, I am not a lawyer, so that's a different role, but I can help negotiate the contract, make sure the contract deal points are all in place so that if a legal issue does come about in the future, we have documentation of the deal. Let's see, where are we at? Creative. Yeah, so as an agent, going out and getting performance opportunities can be a very challenging job, and it can take a lot of time. So one of the benefits of having an agent is they do that work, and as an artist, you can focus on your craft and just spend time doing that. We can go to the next slide. I'll keep this one short. This is benefits for the buyers. And by buyers, I mean really venues, festivals, can be promoters, really anybody that is looking to purchase talent. So as a booking agent, I often have venues or presenters coming to me for talent, and this can happen over many years. So we develop relationships with different buyers. And what that means is the buyers who are in various places in the world, they can come to just the agent and sort of get a list of artist offerings. So instead of them having to go digging and finding how to contact each individual artist and drumming up a relationship from zero and doing the deal with them, they can just come to an agent who already has those relationships in place and can already bring the project that the artist is presenting to the buyer. So we can so basically single point of contact between artist and artist team. As an agent, I can help the buyer with long-term planning. So I could say, these are the artists that are releasing projects in 2020. These are the artists releasing projects in 2021, and so on and so forth. Also, as an agent, you can keep buyers, I say here, on the pulse of new artists and projects and their availability. So as an agent, we're kind of on the pulse of the music that is coming out and who's making it and when they're available to perform live. So the buyers can kind of just stay hip to what's current and what's available and what's in their price range, all of those things. Okay, next slide. Right, so this is the state presenting. I will say this, that in jazz specifically, the agent manager role, the lines can sort of blend at times. So in this case, the agent, manager, and artist discuss the performance goals. So what I mean by that is we come together as a team because the agent is now a part of the artist's team, and we define what it is that our goals are. Meaning, is there a new record coming out? When is it coming out? What are the ideal tour periods that line up with the album cycle? What specific territories and markets are we going for? Are we looking to tour? Are we doing one-off shows? That entire conversation of what does the next 2 years look like in terms of us reaching our goals together, getting this music out to the world and on the road. Let's see, stage. Oh yes. So once we have that defined, what we're going for, I, as the agent, will then go out there and pitch this project to all the buyers in our network. Let's see. Right. So then once that process happens, which honestly can be a matter of many, many months. It can even be a year of just pitching, sort of educating buyers on what this project is and if it fits with their goals as a presenter. And then once a buyer decides, okay, yeah, let's present this artist on such and such date. Typically we put that date on hold and we ask the presenter to send an offer. At that point, they send the deal offer, and that's when the negotiation of the fee, the negotiation of all the travel, hotel, all the deal points are negotiated. Then the agent will take all those, put them into a contract, and essentially send the contract to the buyer. The manager has, some managers like to sign on behalf of the artist. Sometimes the agent will sign if they have permission to do so. Then let's see. Right. So then we enter into the contractual agreement. Once we're in the agreement, the manager and the agent get all the marketing materials, all the most current press assets, everything to the buyer. So the buyer is promoting the proper project and with the most current assets possible. Then, we go through the advance process. Usually the manager will take that on, meaning they book the hotels, they book the flights, they put all the information in the itinerary, and they shoot it off to the artist so everyone knows, essentially what it is that we're doing, all the specific details. And then the artist performs, and after the performance is over, the agent usually collects the fee and distributes to the manager or the artist or whatever the situation calls for. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just a bit about my roster. So as I mentioned, Be Natural was rebranded in actually 2017, and essentially these are a lot of artists that I've had ongoing relationships with for many, many years. Every artist is unique, and every plan for every artist is unique and individual to the artist's career and their goals. So some artists come on. This is obviously looks like a lot of artists for a small agency, but there are cycles to touring. So some artists are more active at some times than others, and it's kind of a rotating cycle of when they're, quote, hot and working a lot, and then there's some downtime. So it kind of, there's a flow to it. Most of my artists, not all, but most of my artists are sort of younger, the younger generation of really cutting edge improvising artists. And they, like I said, they all have either recording deals, or they are, high, even some are just very high profile side artists, but they all compose their own music. They all have their own identity within the music. They're all highly professional, and I feel good about going out and helping these artists to get work and to grow their careers. And so that goes into, I'll go quickly into what I, as an agent, look for in an artist. And it's very, I would say it's very similar to what Gail mentioned about what you look for in a management client. One is, is the artist unique? Is the artist offering something that is completely unique and honest? And once I kind of get engaged with an artist that I feel is doing something that nobody else does, or just doing something on a very high level that would have broad appeal, I start a relationship with them. I start, digging into their music, seeing sort of where do they exist now in the market. Do they have a profile? What is the level of that profile? Is this something that we can build beyond our local, our local environment? But is this something that we can build through the states, all the way to California, up in Canada, Asia, all over Europe? It's like, does this music have that, or does this artist's music and their presence and their being, does it attract that level of interest? And once we define that, it's just a matter of really going out there and sort of digging in those trenches and building those new relationships and opportunities. The artists, we can go into detail in our conversation, but I just need to know that the artist is, very professional, easy to work with, ideally, and also that their management is professional, easy to work with. And once we sort of feel that there's a synergy between the artist, the artist manager, and myself as the agent, I feel like that's time. Okay, the team is ready. Let's go, and then we can kind of build out from there. And I think is that my last slide. Yes. Oh, I don't know if I can't hear anybody.
Yes, it is.
There we go.
Thank you, Chris. That was a wonderful addendum to Gail's presentation, and it also helped to clarify again that distinction between what a manager does, what a booking agent does, and how it is that their roles sometimes overlap. So that will make it extremely helpful for musicians who are considering, going to that next level. If you're just joining us, thank you, first of all, for being here. Ray Jones Avery and I are co-hosting this second part of a two-part forum this morning. First part was getting your act together, turning pro, a great conversation with artists who, have moved into the next level. If you missed that, it will be available. Jonathan, please verify that this will be available for people to view, however it is they do that. So at the end of this, we can tell people how they can either watch it again or watch parts that they missed. I'm Tina Betts. I think I mentioned we have Ray Jones Avery here. Ray is watching that chat room, so please put any of your questions there. We will be fielding questions, and as we have this conversation with Gail and Chris to talk about taking it to the next level, preparing for performing artist agency management representation. As a presenter, you're branding and deciding if you want to book an artist. There's a whole package. In the first part of the first workshop today, I talked about the artists when they show up, the types of behaviors that cement a relationship that makes you want to maybe work with them again in the future. I think part of that branding also comes with the team that the artist builds around them, and that includes a manager or the agent. There are some managers, where you have an artist who is absolutely wonderful, you'd love to work with them again, but then they may have the person who's representing them maybe may not be doing the artist any favors. So Gail, can you talk a little bit about that? How it is that a manager or a booking agent can actually be a detriment to an artist.
I've actually had that experience a few times where I saw a client of mine fire the agent on the spot. We were out in California on a gig, and it just so happens that the agent was out there too. And the agent spoke to the presenter in such a horrible, denigrating way that my client said, "He's done. I don't care if he got me a lot of gigs. I don't want to be represented like that." So I've actually seen that happen. And something that Chris said earlier, and that is that we're a team. Like if it's a situation where I have a client and I'm managing and I'm looking for an agent, we all have to know that we are on the same team and we have like a common goal that we're looking for. And so I don't want to have a situation with an agent where I'm constantly calling the agent saying what's going on. I want the agent to be saying to me, "Gail, this was this is what we were working on." I got some feedback, but nothing happened. Like I can't get this person a gig. And I want that kind of honesty and transparency so that we will know how the artist is even being presented. Because it could be something that Chris is not doing or I'm not doing. It could not be us. It could be that the client has not represented himself or herself well. And people have a bad feeling about that client and don't want to book them no matter who the agent or the manager is. So it's always important to know who your client is and to know what the personality of the whole team is. That kind of transparency is just key.
And Chris, how important, or is it important to have that feedback after an artist performs, that you have that feedback from the presenter, from the person who booked that artist? Do you look for that? Is that valuable? And when you get it, do you pass it on to the artist?
It is valuable, and I do look for it. It depends whether sometimes I pass it on to the artist, sometimes I don't. It's sort of a delicate. That's a delicate thing. Part of an agent's job and a manager's job, in a way, is to protect the artist as well, because there's some things they don't need to know, And but I would say yes, it's valuable. It's also, the presenter is part of the team too, and that's a thing that can be a sticking point for some people, because they say, you got to go and fight for the artist and that's it, and there's truth to that. But sometimes, the presenter is also the one that has the money, and they're the one that has the opportunity, and they also want it to go well too. So, it's a matter of, I often, after a performance and everything is said and done, I'll reach out to the presenter and say, "Hey, thank you. We enjoyed ourselves. Was everything okay for you? How are the numbers?" Just a recap of what it was that we did together, because essentially you want everybody to leave the table feeling good. I don't want as an agent, in sort of the small-minded view of it, it's like, okay, go get us the most money possible, and let's get as much out of this for us as we can. but then the presenter takes a bath and they never have you back, and they never say anything good. And in fact, they might tell their other presenter friends, don't book them, because it didn't feel good. It wasn't, we felt taken advantage of.
It wasn't somehow a good fit. Yeah.
I can tell you that as a part of a large presenter network in the Mid-Atlantic, when presenters have a singular presenter can have a bad experience and share that with the network, and in some ways it's not fair, but
Right.
but the reality is that there's a lot riding on presenting with shrinking resources and all the changes. And if there is a bad experience and it gets shared in a group setting, it doesn't bode well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We have
a
question. Yeah, we have some questions. We want to get through as many as we can. So the first question, I'm trying to interpret the question, is to Gail. Wayne asked that you speak more about marketing. Is there a particular process that artist management, your company, engages in to develop marketing plans and strategies? Are there basic elements that the artist comes to you with, or how does that work?
So it depends on what the artist presents when we start working together. And I'm going to use a couple of examples. If I have a vocalist who sounds like Nancy Wilson, let's say, very elegant, very smooth, but that particular vocalist wants to wear cutoff jeans and sneakers and a sweatshirt when they perform, it doesn't mean that they're not really great vocalists, but are you presenting what it is you say you want to do? Because there's a little bit of a conflict there. There's nothing wrong with the cutoff jeans and the sweatshirt. And the opposite can be true. If I have a client who is just on that generation of wanting to be more of a hip hop vibe, but also playing jazz, then you don't want to put them in a gown because that doesn't work either. They have to represent, they have to visually represent what they say they're trying to give you in their music. So it is very specific for each client that I have. Who are you? What are you trying to represent? What is the audience you're trying to reach? And then how do we figure that out? Now, sometimes I will bring in a consultant. If that artist is making enough money that we can do that, I may bring in somebody to say, how would you recommend this person look, act, sound like when we do media training, so that they will be able to represent what it is they say they want to do, but it's very specific.
Mm-hmm. So it's personalized and customized to that particular artist.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
May I chime in on that?
Sure.
May I chime in on the marketing piece really quick?
Sure.
I'm learning and seeing more and more how important marketing actually is, and the image and the whole likeness of the artist. I think is becoming more and more important in the digital space. So essentially what Gail says is that as a manager, she meets with the artist, makes sure that the marketing assets are all on point, and then they're given to me as the agent to go out and sell, basically. So nowadays, if you look at the marketing assets for kind of the new artists, or you can even go into the pop space and see how important those like marketing assets are. Their image, their what they have to be telling a story, not just through their music, but they have to tell their story through everything that they are and everything everything that their being is, and it has to be put in on these screens for people to check out and see. So that's, I just wanted to say that.
Great. A quick follow-up to that, and then we have a couple of other questions, and I know Tina has some as well. Do you also provide guidance for your artists in terms of their use of their personal social media? Because that is a part of one's brand. And there have been some artists that have made some commentary on their personal social media political views or whatever the case may be, that also may create some barriers. So is that a part of the development process?
Not so much, because I don't want to ever be in a position where I'm editing or where I am trying to tell an artist what to say or what to feel. I know some artists who really part of their brand is being confrontational. Part of their brand is saying things that are not popular. And if they can carry that off and still, play and know their instrument and get hired, I'm not going to edit that. I don't want to ever be in a position where I tell an artist what to say, think, or feel. We are in a process right now of double pandemics. We've got coronavirus and then we've got social injustice. And if an artist really wants to talk about that on his or her personal page, far be it from me to stop them from doing that. So I don't get involved too much in that.
Thank you. Krista, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm very similar in my approach. I generally work with artists that I believe in who they are and what they do, and I just let them do it.
Okay, and great.
Similar to Gail, once a relationship is developed and if they come to me for advice, I'm happy to share what I think would work. But until they do that, I let them go.
Great. Thank you. This is a question for both Chris and Gail. Do you work exclusively with younger or new artists, or will you consider older and seasoned artists who are obscure? That's the question in the chat.
So for me, being obscure is more of a challenge than being seasoned. Because I will take an artist regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of race, ethnicity. I will take them if something hits me in my heart. But if they're so obscure that we have to introduce them to the whole world, I'm not sure, and especially if they're seasoned, I'm not sure how much help I could be to them, but if it hits me in the right way, I might try. I mean, I have taken on some people that ultimately they weren't successful, nor was I, but they hit me in the right way, and I sure doggone tried.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris,
So I mean,
yeah.
Did you want? It was directed to both you and Gail. Then we'll go to Tina.
Yeah, I mean, I feel exactly the same way. I don't look at age or anything like that. But the obscure piece does make it more challenging because I may not be able to quote represent them because there isn't enough interest there to make money. And again, this is a business but sometimes those kind of obscure artists are the ones that fuel me as a creative. So I will have relationships with them and I will advise them, and I'll sometimes go along that path for quite some time, and then we may decide, okay, it's not going anywhere, or it might go somewhere, and that's the goal. But it doesn't mean that we as artists, managers, and agents don't have relationships with artists outside of our roster.
Your roster, yep.
Right. So I have a lot of, in other words, I have a lot of artists, young and old, that come around asking questions and wanting to hang out a little bit, and that's cool. I like that to a certain degree.
Great. Tina.
Yeah, one of the best ways, I think, as from the presenter, a person who may be, wanting to book an artist, is to actually have an opportunity to see that artist perform. I mean, having, a YouTube and, a one-dimensional photo, and of course the pitch from the manager or the agent is helpful. But actually having the opportunity to be in the space with the artist, and I know that the conference, the APAP conference in New York, offers an opportunity to do that, or had offered an opportunity to do that prior to this year. I mean, are there other innovative ways that you've come up with, especially through this pandemic, of having people who may have an interest in somebody on your roster to actually have an close and personal experience, or a deeper experience with what that audience, brings to the table. Gail?
You know, I miss APAP because every year during APAP, I would have a showcase with my clients on Saturday and on Saturday at Yamaha and on Sundays at the Hilton. And that really is an opportunity for presenters such as yourself. And you've been, Tina, to a couple of them where you get a chance to sit in an intimate environment and actually watch a client perform, and they're performing for you. They're saying, buy me, buy me, buy me. And so I don't know what the replacement is, because this year at APAP, I did have pre-recorded concerts of each of my artists on APAP. So if you signed up for APAP, you could go and watch the video. It wasn't the same though. I did, I might have gotten a couple of things, but people really sometimes want to be able to sit there and watch you as you are creating. And I don't know what the substitute is right now. I just can't wait for us to get past this double pandemic.
Yeah, it's going to be great to actually be in the same room. And Chris, I mean, could one way to go, even having an opportunity to hear the artist's voice outside of their performing. So have you maybe thought of ways of introducing, and this is coming out of that question about an obscure artist, having, the presenter or a group of presenters actually have a conversation, maybe watch a pre-recorded performance, but have a conversation so that there's voice to voice. Is that something that you've considered or done successfully?
Yeah, that definitely happens from time to time. We're often setting up interviews with maybe not directly with the presenter, but with somebody involved with the presenter. In normal times, I would just invite them to the gig.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a presenter that wants to present an artist at a performing arts center in Kansas, but I happen to have that artist on tour playing a little club in that town, a year before or something. So I'd say, oh, this artist is playing at the club. You should go down and see the show. Or when APAP is happening, obviously, actually Winter Jazz Fest is a way that we do that a lot. It's like there are these little showcases. All the buyers and industry folks are in New York. So I usually, in that case, I will print out like a poster actually that has all the artists that I represent and where they're playing, and we try to get them out. In the virtual space, it's like it varies, but I guess it'll be something like, oh, this artist just did a virtual performance and Q&A. Here's the link, check it out. Or even send them the link before, like, I can get you a comp to this or that, So we want to incentivize, the buyer to get involved and basically it's inviting them to the party.
So if there's an artist who's considering taking it to the next level, considering this artist, this relationship with a manager or booking agent, and say you cement the relationship, how is it that you decide, or do you decide to maybe highlight an artist over another artist on your roster? I mean, Chris, do you ever find yourself in that position where there's an artist where you just really want to push out there for whatever reason? And if you do, what is the reason?
Yeah, great question. So yes, this is something that absolutely happens. A lot of times it's yes, my personal, commitment and passion for that artist and that project, but also sometimes it's literally just the demand in the market. And that usually is centered around the artist's, but what we call buzz. Yeah. Is there a buzz on the scene? Is there, that's usually actually where it starts. And I'll say one of the benefits that I have is that I'm in New York, so there's oftentimes that I'll hear about an artist 2 or 3 years before they even have anything out, just on the scene, and they create a buzz and you start hearing them. I may have heard an artist 20 times before before I decide to work with them or whatever. So I know what their abilities are, and I know is this the person, that's going to take that space. And then, it usually has to do with an album cycle, or just actually it comes down to what is the artist doing? What are they creating? What are they putting out there? And, if they're creating a lot and they're producing stuff and work is happening, they tend to go to the top of the roster because it's just the work comes in and there's stuff to do. And, it's always, as an agent, I can send out a round of pitches, and for certain artists, you'll get 100 responses, and for another artist you'll get 1 response, and for other artists you'll get nothing, crickets. So it just sort of depends on what comes back. I always use the analogy of going fishing. It's like I'm casting a wide net, or not even a wide net, I'm casting a net and seeing what we can pull in.
And Ray, I think you have a question from the chat room.
We do have a question from the chat room. The question is, we are living in an age where artists are blurring the lines as far as genres are concerned. Does this make your job as an agent or manager easier or challenging? I added the other part. So I want me to repeat it. We're living in an age where artists are blurring the lines as far as genres are concerned. Does this make your job as an agent or presenter easier?
Okay, I mean, this kind of takes us back to that question, like, what is jazz, for example? So, and I know, and I think I know that both Gail and Chris, you kind of work, closely in the jazz. I know Gail does, and I'm assuming for Chris, from what I know about your agent. So, I mean, Gail, if you have an artist that comes and let's just use let's use the hip hop genre. So you hear, and that's their thing. And so, and they come to you, you specifically deal most closely with jazz. Would that artist have a chance to work with you simply because they weren't jazz?
If they want to stay exclusively in the hip hop lane, I will tell them that I'm probably not the best manager for them. I don't know that world completely. And so if they want to stay in that lane, I would say I'm probably not the one. But if they come to me and they say, I'm doing jazz, but I love hip hop. I'm throwing elements of hip hop in what I'm doing. I'm throwing elements of European classical music. I'm throwing elements of African classical music, and I'm coming up with my own thing. I'm probably going to be really intrigued. Yeah. And I'm going to say, okay, how do you see that working? And where do you see the perform? Who is your audience for that? And if I'm intrigued enough to think that I can try to make something out of that, I would probably do it. But if they come to me and say, I am an opera singer singing European classical music, I'm going to say, I'm not the one. I can't help you. And it would just be a waste of both our times.
Yeah. And Chris, how would you, I mean, what type of advice would you give an artist who is, maybe an artist who is blurring the lines? I mean, it's, that was a very honest answer, Gail. And I love that your door is wide enough open to embrace that artist who is mixing. And a lot of artists are doing that because there is a lot of blurring of the lines. But, if an artist came to you, Chris, how is it that you would guide them about having a relationship with you?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and honestly, I could speak about the word jazz and all of its connotations for an hour. It's true that a lot of artists are now innovating and straddling the lines between multiple genres. I mean, jazz, if that's what we're talking about, is a representation of the times. And the times now are all about collaborations, and which is actually personally something that I find inspiring. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of jazz, quote, jazz artists going beyond and breaking the mold, and that's, something that I'm always striving for. So and everybody's different, you know. Some folks are like, nope, I'm in the jazz lane and I want to be in the jazz lane and that's it, you know. And then there's other folks that kind of do multiple things. For me personally, I am looking to work with excellent artists and amazing people that are creating something. So whether that's jazz or whether it's a singer-songwriter, whether it's a world artist, whether, you know, all of those things, to me, I can find a way to work with that, because to me it's actually all the same thing. You know, I represented an excellent, one of the greatest singers in the world named Buika, and she's a flamenco singer, you know, and honestly one of the greatest performers I've ever seen. And I could, you know, she fit right in the roster, you know, why not? I mean, you know, she yeah, all these artists, they all have a common language, and that's music. So what your question was, what do I advise or look for in an artist? When you do blur the lines, it can be tricky. And a lot of times when I go to sell an artist, the buyer needs to know what they're buying, right? So sometimes the greatest artists come to me and say, man, I've got 5 projects. I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. I've got this, you know, oh, and I can write for orchestra. You know, it's like, okay, that's all great, but I can't wrap my brain around that. So what makes you think that, you know, somebody in another part of the world is going to understand what to do with that, right? So I usually say to artists, yes, you do all of those things, and that's all great, but what is the thing you do best? Which of these projects is the most you know? And let's focus on that. Once you build your name in the market, you can do whatever you want. But that initial kind of like building of your name, I feel like you need to come with something clear, something that just is concise, it makes sense financially, marketing wise, it vibrates with the times, it speaks to the most people. You know, let's go with that project first. If we succeed with that, we can start doing these other projects.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me, Chris, of the artists who will come to you and say, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I'm just me. I just want to be me. I don't want you to tell me what it is. And I'm saying, but okay. And so how I do it, I say, okay, if I walk into a record store, remember those? I always say, if I walk into a record store, what department am I going to walk into to find your album? And that helps them focus. It's like, am I going to go to the jazz? Am I going to go to the R&B? I'm going to go to the European classical? Like, you tell me, where would I find your album? And that kind of focuses them, because they would say, well, all of them. And I'm like, no, that's not, they're going to pitch you somewhere. Right. So you tell me, when you go into the record store, where would you find your own album? And that helps to focus exactly where they want to be.
I agree. And I will say that, you know, a lot of the greatest artists don't have gigs, you know, and if you want to be as eclectic as you want to be and as artistic as you want to be, do it. But it, you know, it doesn't mean that you're a business.
Right.
And you know, America absolutely loves to promote dead people. So if you want to be that person that creates a body of work your whole life, and you want that to be, you know, dug up and, you know, after your death, and people make a bunch of money from you because you're a great artist after you died, you can do that. But if you want to make money now,
you can only because you want to spend it. I mean, you kind
of have to play the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Is American, you know, capitalism. And,
it's not, you know, it's also, I mean, you can kind of, you know, talk about this even in a context of going after grant money from a foundation or from a corporation. You have to know also what pushes the button of that foundation, or what pushes the button of that corporation, and you have to know who that is. I mean, and I just want to take this opportunity to mention that last night we teased out the dates for the 2021 Clifford Brown Jazz Festival, and that's that first week in August. Yay, we're so excited about that. So just putting that out there, and we get a lot of pitches. We're really fortunate that a lot of people are interested in playing that festival, and sometimes and what we've tried to do with that festival over the years is not box in, like this, it's not jazz, so we don't want to do, and we take some hits for that every now and then. But also, if an agent or a manager is pitching their client for the Clifford Brown Jazz Festival, they really do have to know something about the Clifford Brown Jazz Festival. Take a look at, who has been presented before. And I think artists also, may want to take some time to do that homework. So, when you're talking to a client, Gail, do you ask them to do that type of background check? If they come to you and say, I heard about this opportunity, can you check it out for me? I really want to work it. Do you put it back on them to do some homework about that opportunity, or do you do it and then come back to them and say, yeah, this is a great fit for you, or maybe this isn't one that we want to go after? I mean, how do you guide a client around that?
I view it as my job to do the research for them. If they come to me and say, I want to, I'm doing European classical music and I want to play at the Clifford Brown Jazz Festival, I'm not going to make them go and look and see what you've presented. I'm going to do that. And then I'll go back to the artist and say, I don't think this is a good fit, or I think it's a great fit. Let's try to see if we can get you on. But that's what I mean. I view my job as a manager is to take everything away from the artist that I possibly can, to leave the artist free to create.
Yes.
And then to consult with me when they need to, and I will go and find the answer and come back to them. If I'm sending them off to do the research, they don't really need me. If they've got buzz enough, they can go straight to Chris and say, would you book me? And because I've done all my research. So part of when an artist needs a manager is when they are trying to stretch out, do more things, and have me do a lot of the legwork for them so they can create.
That's really good, and that helps make that distinction between, again, the role of the artist manager and the role of the artist booking agent. I mean, that's such an important distinction for artists who are moving to the next level to understand.
Yes.
Do we have anything from the chat room, Ray, that we want to put out there?
We certainly do. Does an artist need to be recognizable nationally to be ready for representation? How wide does the buzz have to spread?
No, an artist doesn't have to be recognizable nationally. But as Chris used the term earlier, and I had a dear friend who was in the music industry for years, he called it that indefinable thing called buzz. The buzz could be local. It could be, it could just be that everybody in one small town is buzzing about you and you're about to go wider. You may not have already gone wider, but that might be why you need the help. And then if you come to me and you say, I'm getting all this attention in my little podunk town, you might be ready for some wider recognition, and it might be a manager and an agent that can help you get there. So no, it doesn't. If you are at a point where you are recognizable nationally, you probably already have management and an agent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I think this next question goes back to the earlier conversation around genres. Could an artist also choose their artistic direction based on their album cycle?
I think that's a mistake, because if you put out a jazz album and you build an audience with that product, and then you say, my next album I want it to be R&B, you might lose the audience that you were building. So you want to figure out a way to bridge them. Maybe if you have one or two songs in that album and then you do another album that continues that trend, but to just stop one thing and go completely to something else, I think you're going to confuse the public and your audience. That's my opinion. Do you think the same, Chris?
Generally, yes. Yes, I do. again, we don't want to confuse people with who you are and what you do. I mean, you can do it, again, like I said, and a lot of artists historically have done that. But if we're talking about, you know, building your brand, building your name in the market, you have to be clear with what that is, or as clear as possible. And it can, I would say, it can, you know, change over, you know, time. Like Yo-Yo Ma, classical cello. And then he's moved into kind of collaborating in the pop world and doing these various different things. But that was later. That was after he was Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. And I was going to say there have been a couple, Hiromi, for example,
Right.
who we had before she was Hiromi,
Right.
in quotes. And I mean, Ray, you've had that experience over and over again with artists that you present before they became who they became. You presented them, you know, when you were executive director of a Christina Cultural Arts Center, and then all of a sudden a year later, they burst out on the scene. A really interesting story, and this goes to what Chris and Gail were just talking about with artists, you know, beginning to work outside their lane. We had a very famous artist here a few years ago that we presented with a symphony orchestra during the jazz festival. And of course, you know, people were really excited to have that artist, and the concert, the performance was extraordinary. But people in the audience kept calling out, play, you know, whatever it was that artist was famous for. And finally the artist turned around and said, I'm here with a symphony orchestra. You know, that's not in the, so it was an interesting and an enlightening experience. Let me put it that way. Any other questions, Ray, from the chat room? We want to make sure we get everybody's voices heard.
Yes, ma'am. This is a question. In the post-COVID era, are you reimagining the range of services that you're providing artists because of the changing modalities for presenting performing artists?
Well, I've been talking to all my clients about doing a pre-recorded concert that I could license to places where they're not ready yet to have a full audience, so that people could still see and hear them. I've been talking to them about changes in the contract so that we can make sure that COVID protocols are being followed. I've been talking to them about changes in the contract dealing with force majeure, when deposits are given. You know, whether or not, if you have already spent part of that money buying flights, for example, and then the presenter asks for all the money back, but the flights are non-refundable, all those things have to be kind of talked about. So I'm reimagining the services in that I'm trying to accommodate all of those things. What isn't, you know, what would be considered grounds for canceling? If you are in fact scheduled to be in Minneapolis on the week that the Derek Chauvin verdict was going to come in, that's not an act of God, but I may want to cancel my contract, and I may not want to suffer as a result, or at least share the burden with the presenter in some way. So, you know, we have to think about all those kinds of things now, and then have them be ready to do something different. Have them be ready to go into the studio and do a pre-recorded concert, or do what Chris was saying, have interviews with a set of presenters or something like that. I'm thinking about all of that.
Yeah. So I kind of, COVID has definitely taught me a lot as a professional in this music. I've had time to kind of sit down, really look at like the playing field, which has changed a bit. I would say there's two tiers to what you said. There's like the recording world and the changes that are that are constantly happening in the recording space, whether it's video or audio. So for example, I'm now working with an artist that's collaborating with pop artists. So the contracts that we have are, you know, it's not even necessarily a financial guarantee. It's like a percentage of royalty points, or a, you know, these various like nuances to to deals. So I'm not just involved in live performances, but actually like, okay, we're putting out this track with, featuring this famous artist, right? So we're going into a deal with the creator of the track, and then we're also going into a deal with the featured artist, and that usually has to do with publishing, royalty points, things like that. So that's something that I see happening more and more now, because I mean it's always been going on, but now since COVID, we have that happening in live streaming, in pre-recorded streaming, even virtual clinics, this and that. It's like, who has the rights?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. Like, who has the rights to their master? Who's getting paid off of that master? Who's getting played off of plays, Spotify plays, or Apple plays? Because Cardi B is making millions of dollars off of streaming. Why? Because that song streamed 1 billion times and it's monetized, right? So there's that. And then in the performance space, it's also become more complicated, specifically with kind of, maybe with jazz artists that have a more kind of old school approach, which is when they perform, they don't want it recorded, they don't want it archived, they don't want that performance to go beyond that live performance. And if anything goes beyond it, they want to negotiate what that is, right? So is it being archived? What does that look like? How long is it being archived? All of those details. Is it on Facebook Live? Is it on YouTube? Is it recorded and going to be up on YouTube in perpetuity? All of those things. Some artists say, great, let's rock. Let's do it. The more exposure, the better. Some artists say, absolutely not. Some artists say, yeah, I'll do it if you pay me. So, it's all of that stuff. And so to tie it into the question, I just am entering into those conversations more and more. Whereas before COVID, it was like, here's the performance, sign the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like there's these specific deal points that get sticky. Also, I'll just say a big thing, because of the downtime this year, a lot of the clubs had to, obviously go virtual. So they bought the equipment, they're doing all this stuff, and they're splitting the revenue with the artists. And I see that as kind of like a new addition to gigs. It's like, we'll do a gig at a club, there will be a fee for that, and then there'll also be a virtual stream happening, and there'll be a fee for that.
Yeah.
So I think in a way it can work out in our benefit.
Right. It's really fascinating. It's a whole new era. It's a whole new body of law that would you say is under development with still ambiguity that needs to be figured out. Awesome. Now, where was the I'm looking at the clock here. I want to make sure that our audience leaves satisfied, and you're getting great affirming comments. This is so valuable. So thank you to both of you.
Ray, but before you ask the next question, let's just remind, just in case people are just joining us, if they just happen upon us, we're speaking with Gail Boyd and Chris Meese, and we're talking about artist booking agent, artist management, how you get there, how you know you're ready for those two services. And this is part of the City of Wilmington's celebration of International Jazz Day.
Okay. Thank you. This question is for Gail. How do you feel about distribution deals?
I'm in favor of any deal where the artist keeps ownership of his or her master. So that's a distribution deal or a licensing deal where And I prefer, and I actually have more experience with the licensing deal, because then I'm still talking to a label and taking advantage of the things that they have to offer while I still own my master, and I'm just licensing the master to them for a period of time. But what I'm not in favor of is any deal where you give away ownership of your master in this day and age, and much of the things that Chris was just talking about in terms of who gets paid and when. A lot of it has to do with who owns the master, and that's why I'm in favor of distribution deals straight with distributors. And I know that there are some who will do that, and I have a couple of clients who have straight distribution deals here in the US and again in Europe. I kind of like the one-stop shopping of doing a licensing deal with a label so that they deal with the distribution, but they also help me with marketing and publicity, promotion, and things like that.
Okay. Thank you. There is a South African jazz pianist currently based in New York that has a question. I don't want to mess the name up. Zoe Molelekwa. Do you seek out the artists you manage, or should artists be proactive in reaching out?
Both. And I mean, before the pandemic, when I was, in New York on a regular basis, I just live out just a little outside of New York, but since the pandemic, I haven't been going back and forth. I might see someone and approach them and say, hey, what are you doing? Do you have management? And then some people will walk up to me and say, may I give you my CD, or would you come to my gig? So it's both.
Okay. Just one more, and then we may, Tina, invite Gail and Chris to share any closing comments, anything we haven't discussed. I think is really important to point out. The last one is in present day, many artists are independently producing their records. Who does one contract with in terms of those that they collaborate with, including people that are co-composers?
You want that one?
You mean other than an entertainment attorney?
Yeah. So that is the answer. You need an attorney.
Well, sometimes the worst things that can happen is to do things based on friendship where everybody is just shaking hands, because that handshake means different things to different people. And sometimes even if you have a very short contract, I have a case, I won't even say what it was, but it was like a handshake deal and a one-page contract, and it took me 10 years of litigation to sort it all out.
Wow.
So I say if you have concerns like that, at the very least, get a consultation with an entertainment attorney.
Thank you. And thank you. So that's it for the chat. You got this will be the thank yous in the chat will be a part of the recording. Huge thank you to our distinguished guests. And you want to have some closing remarks?
Go ahead, Gail.
I feel very strongly that some of the things that came up even earlier for musicians to think about, and that is to be prepared, to be respectful if you are hired by another musician, be respectful enough to learn the music before you show up at rehearsal, be on time, do the kinds of things that if you are treating this as a business, you would do as you would in any business. You want to be prepared. You want to do your best. You're going to practice your music. That's a given. But the other things that make managers and agents even want to work with you is that you have a good reputation regarding the business aspect of it, because at the bottom line, it is transactional. As much as I love Tina and Ray, at some point we got to talk about figures,
business,
dollars and cents. It comes to that at some point. But before we get there, there's a lot that has to go into it, and I just think that musicians, if they're prepared, it's just the best thing. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Chris?
Yeah, I also I liked what Jonathan said earlier. I think he said define business saves friendships. Right? And I was like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense, because personally, I have done a lot of handshake handshake deals over the years because it makes sense. But as I grow, I can definitely see the benefit of just having outlined, job descriptions. Like what are we doing here? Who's doing what? So that we just know exactly where we stand, and it's very clear. So it doesn't get into the minutia and all that. So I guess what I always say is artists, don't look to an agent or a manager to make your career happen. It's ultimately up to you as the artist to create art and to create the demand. And then once you get there, build your team and trust your team. You have to surround yourself with people that you trust, and you have to give people the benefit of the doubt, but be smart about that. And then once you make that commitment, you say, all right, we're doing this. Let people do their jobs. Get out of their way. Get out of your own way. Let it work. Let us work. And then if it's working out, excellent. If it's not, then you can address it then. And sometimes people make mistakes. Things happen. You got to be flexible. You got to say, we're not, we're a team. We're not enemies. I'm not trying to take advantage of you. You're not trying to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
Let's do this as a team, common goal. Get that in your mind. And then when people, trust people until they give you a reason not to. And then you can move how you need to move, But that's what I'd say that. And again, thank you all for having me. This is my favorite conversation. I could keep going for hours. So,
well, we could keep you going for hours, and you will have the opportunity to repeat yourself over and over again without actually showing up, because this is being recorded and will be available on the Clifford Brown Facebook page and also on YouTube. And the title of this workshop was Taking It to the Next Level, Preparing for Performing Artist Agency Management. I have to tell you, not only was this a valuable for artists, it was also a valuable conversation for people who want to present artists and to have a working relationship with the artist and the manager and the booking agent. Gail and Chris, this has been absolutely wonderful. It's a great way for the city of Wilmington to recognize and celebrate International Jazz Day. We had a great concert last night with Terrell Stafford, featured with our Clifford Brown Festival Band, and we gave out our first Clifford Brown International Day awards to 5 awardees. And so this is a great way of topping off the celebration. Thank you to everybody who's joined us this morning, either for one or both of these workshops. As I mentioned, it is available on the Clifford Brown Facebook page and also on YouTube. So please make sure you check it out. The questions have been great. Reminding that we have announced that the Clifford Brown Jazz Festival is scheduled to take place that first week in August. Continue to check the Clifford Brown Facebook page for updated information. I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Ray, Jones, Avery. It's always a pleasure to work with you on any project. This has just been one of many. Thank you to Jonathan Whitney for hosting the first panel this morning. That was a great conversation, a great setup for this panel, and for the panelists, Nadjah, Nicole, Mike Boone, and Gerald Chavis. There was also some really good information in that first workshop about grants that are available for artists. And, all of the granting agencies, or most of them anyway, will give you advice about how to fill out an application. Sometimes that's a little bit, intimidating to go to an application for granting. Don't be intimidated. If you know your craft, you deserve to be rewarded for it in every way that's possible. So again, thank you very, very much. Have a great rest of the day, a great rest of the week, and we will see you all soon. Thanks a lot.
all right, thank you.
Bye.